Hi there Waltineers, I'm Jack and this is DSNY Newscast, and today I want to talk about the Magic Kingdom and kind of bring everybody up to speed on the latest of what's actually happening with this whole Rivers of America transformation into the new Cars area and the Villains Land that was announced at D23. As you see, recently there's been a tiny bit of a hiccup in terms of the preliminary planning stages for this project, and I want to talk about how this is going to potentially impact the time frame for construction and the logistical issues for overcoming it. And then in the main bulk of this video, I want to get into talking about the Cars area and the Cars attraction in much greater depth and talk about what we can expect from a Cars area at the Magic Kingdom, as after all, that's what's in the thumbnail of this video. But where I want to begin today is actually the day after D23. As on that Monday, Disney made public their permit that they filed with the South Florida Water Management District for this construction project. And this is standard that Disney do this, as after all, where Walt Disney World is located, it's surrounded by wetland area, and so for them to do any sort of large-scale construction activity like this, they do need to consult the South Florida Water Management District on their construction plans. But in this permit, the main takeaway here is that for Disney to use the Rivers of America for construction, they're going to need to take some of the surrounding wetland areas just outside of the berm of the Magic Kingdom and convert it into what's known as gravel laydown yards. And the purpose of doing this is then it would stabilize that land for the construction staging in preparation for going vertical where they're going to build inside Rivers of America. So that's the main takeaway from the permit there. But then roughly a month later, in mid-September, Disney received a letter from the South Florida Water Management District outlining 20 individual requests for additional information. And this is the really important thing, as you see, Disney has 90 days from when they receive that letter to then gather together all of the additional information that's been requested and submit an official response. And needless to say, if they failed to do so within that 90-day period, their application would then be dismissed. And that would obviously significantly delay things, as they would then have to start the process all over again. Now, personally, I don't think that's at risk of happening whatsoever, but I do want to very quickly go over the main areas where they're wanting more information, just so you're fully in the picture of what Disney needs to do here. As you see, Disney needs to demonstrate that they have pursued alternative site plans to reduce the impact on the wetland functions. Now, this will be interesting, as Disney always considers alternative site plans. So, as part of this response to this application, it's going to be interesting to see if we get the alternative plans that they were considered that were not as optimal as the plan to build where Rivers of America is. So that will be interesting from that perspective. The state would also like to see further wildlife studies and potential impacts to protected species and the natural biome of the area. And that's important because, as we all know, Rivers of America, it is an artificial, man-made, very shallow lake area, but it does share the same water as Seven Seas Lagoon, and so therefore they're going to need to show that it won't affect any of the natural biome in the water there. And then for them to do the gravel laydown yards that Disney needs to stabilise the land here, they also need to show the South Florida Water Management District how they're going to offset that wetland area that's being used up there elsewhere on property. And you know, it's often said that Walt Disney World has the blessing of size, but what many people don't realise is that they can't just construct and expand wherever they want. As you see, Disney has to maintain a ratio in terms of conservation space and, you know, the wetland areas as well. And Disney went on a bit of a buying spree back in 2020, buying up more acreage around property to make this kind of expansion possible in the future, as they are kind of tied in terms of how much more they can expand, as they do need to keep that conservation ratio intact. And then most importantly, the state would like to see the hydro period studies. Now, what this is the removal of the wetland areas from the body of water of the Rivers of America. They want to see how that will have an impact on the flooding in the surrounding areas. So Disney needs to show that very important study there as well. Now, clearly Disney's going to submit an official response to this whole thing on time, but I do think they were kind of surprised at the extent to which they were being asked for all this additional information, and it does make me wonder how much of an impact is this going to have on the potential time frame for the beginning of construction, as previously it was originally rumoured that Disney was looking at an early 2025 time frame for the closure of Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island at the Magic Kingdom. And I'm talking January, February timeframe. That's how early they were looking at closing Tom Sawyer Island and Rivers of America at the Magic Kingdom to make way for this construction. But now they've got to gather all this additional information and potentially go back and forth a few times with the South Florida Water Management District. It might delay things by maybe a month or two into March or April for the closure period. Or perhaps the next time they go back to the South Florida Water Management District, they get the green light and go ahead and they can continue with their original plan of early 2025. But one way or another, it's going to be the first half of 2025 that we're going to see the closure of Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island at the Magic Kingdom. And so if you've got a trip booked in the next few months and you want to say one last farewell, definitely swing by the Rivers of America and do that and make it a priority, as Disney executives are definitely dead set on the removal of Rivers of America as the more optimal plan for construction at the Magic Kingdom. And I know a lot of people are upset and sad to see the removal of Rivers of America. Personally, I've always enjoyed the scenic ambience that Rivers of America adds to the Magic Kingdom, and I like to escape the hustle and bustle of the rest of Magic Kingdom and go over to Tom Sawyer Island for a bit of scenic ambience. But there's a lot of reasons why they're deciding on this plan over any other plan for the construction. Not only is it more cost effective, but also from a maintenance perspective, that's the main one. And you may have noticed in recent years that Disney's drained the Rivers of America and been doing quite a bit of work on the basin. And you've got the utilidors nearby and they can't risk any sort of leakage issues. And they would just like to get rid of Rivers of America from that standpoint, instead of continually putting money into it, into a kind of a money pit, when they could put new attractions there that would offer more capacity to the Magic Kingdom. As after all, the Magic Kingdom is the most visited of any of the Disney parks in the world, of any theme park in the world. It has 17 million visitors every single year to Magic Kingdom. So the Magic Kingdom desperately needs more attractions and help disperse people across the entire park. And so by removing Rivers of America, they're able to add more capacity to the park. But then the other thing that you've got to consider is that if you've been over to Tom Sawyer Island recently, if I'm being honest, I'm kind of surprised that it's made it this long into the life of the Magic Kingdom in the way that it has, because it definitely is a relic of the past. You know, from a health and safety standpoint and just a pure ADA accessibility standpoint, it's a bit of a headache for Disney from those two perspectives. And so they've been looking at it for quite some time in terms of a replacement to Tom Sawyer Island. And then also an IP perspective, it's not something they own. So Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, they don't have the licensing rights and the IP, so therefore they can't really monetize it. Whereas replacing it with something like Pixar's Cars, I'm not the biggest Cars fan, but I can see the reason why Disney are choosing Cars here, is because out of the highest grossing media franchises that they could possibly choose, Pixar's Cars franchise ranks 16 overall out of every single media franchise out there. And then out of Disney's highest grossing media franchises, it ranks number 7 overall, earning $21.5 billion throughout its entire lifespan. And out of that $21.5 billion, $19 billion of that comes from merchandise sales. So Disney's really seeing the dollar signs here in terms of how they can get the return on the investment from Cars in the same location, which is something they're not doing with Tom Sawyer as an IP. And all of this is just to give the reasons for why Disney is seeing the removal of Rivers of America as a more optimal plan instead of expanding beyond the berm, because then that's got its own issues in terms of the wetlands and the amount of money they've got to spend on transforming and land grading that land as well. But considering these plans, the one thing I really do hope they do save is the Liberty Square riverboat, and they find a new home for it somewhere else on property, as it could easily be permanently docked over at Port Orleans Riverside, or permanently docked to the side of a wedding pavilion at the Grand Floridian. It would work there as well, or maybe even Disney Springs, but I hope they do save it, as there's a lot of history tied to the riverboat. But now, with all that being said, let's get into what we can expect from this Cars area at the Magic Kingdom. as we all saw the artwork roughly a month ago, and now I've got a higher res version of that same piece of artwork, which we can dive into in a minute. But the first thing I want to mention is that this Cars themed area is going to be roughly around 4 to 4.5 acres within Frontierland. So if you imagine the front half of Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island, that is where this Cars area is going to be located. So although it seems like it's going to be within Frontierland and take over the entirety of Frontierland, it's just going to become Cars land in many ways, it's not, because it's going to be very much compartmentalized within Frontierland. And I know that is a relatively small size in terms of an area, but the design of the main attraction there, it is going to be integrated within the entire 4 to 4.5 acres. So this attraction is going to feel fairly expansive in its scale, and it's going to offer a lot of kinetic energy and movement to the actual area itself, whilst still being compartmentalized within Frontierland. Now, the area itself is being described as being Cars themed, but in terms of the actual theming of the area, it's not going to be anything like Radiator Springs. It's actually drawing inspiration from a movie called Planes, Fire and Rescue, which came out in 2014, which wasn't actually a Pixar movie. It was made by Disney Toon Studios, and in this movie, Planes, Fire and Rescue, it specifically takes the Cars universe to this place called the Piston Peak National Park as an environment. And as we can see in the artwork, it's drawing a lot of its inspiration from the Piston Peak National Park environment, which is drawing real life inspiration from Yosemite and Yellowstone national parks. And so therefore that's what Imagining's really going to be building upon in terms of the American frontier and the national parks environment and the openness of all of that. And we can even see in the artwork, if we zoom in, the entrance to the main attraction for this land seems to be inspired by the Grand Fusel Lodge, which was also seen within Planes, Fire and Rescue, that movie there as well. It certainly shares a lot of parallels with that movie, and this Cars area is definitely set within the Cars universe, but not necessarily inspired by Cars 1, 2 or 3 in terms of any of those locations, but instead it's going to be drawing more from the Piston Peak National Park environment instead. And from the landscape perspective, we're going to see the geysers of Yellowstone represented within the artwork here. We've got snow-capped mountains of the Colorado Rockies that are going to be featured there. So it's this whole new kind of idea of the American frontier and the wilderness yet to be explored within Frontierland. And then also within the artwork, we can see that the riverboat dock has been left intact within that artwork. And I think personally that this is for one or two reasons. It's either that it's going to be a national park overlook where you kind of come up to it and like look out across the expansive landscape of this new area, which would be fantastic, or they might be using this riverboat dock as a kind of transition point between the existing Frontierland and then this new area of Frontierland, which is obviously very heavily inspired by the national parks of America. And so from a theming perspective, I am actually very excited to see how this thing turns out, as after all, if we look at the incredible rockwork design that we've seen Imagineering do in recent years, Zolt Horme has led this whole thing across Imagineering in terms of the rockwork design of Fantasy Springs over in Tokyo Disney Sea, Pandora, the World of Avatar, and obviously Cars Land in California Adventure. If we get this level of theming to the rockwork within this whole new area of Frontierland, I think it's going to offer a completely unique scenic ambience within Magic Kingdom, which a lot of people will be surprised at. And in many ways, I think it will be very similar in a way to the Grizzly Peak section of Disney California Adventure. That's obviously very heavily inspired by the national parks within California. And the other thing to consider here is the fact is that there's quite the elevation change between Frontierland and the basin of Rivers of America. So therefore you've got around 10, 15 feet there to then use that elevation change and even build up above it by, let's say, 20 feet. And then you've got quite the rockwork and mountainous landscape there, which will then also offer that kind of buffer between Frontierland and then this national park inspired Frontierland, all coexisting within the same exact new land. But then we come to the main attraction as part of this land, and as we can see in the concept art, we'll begin inside of the building where there will be the load and unload for the attraction. Then we'll line up for the beginning of the race underneath the start banner, and we'll then begin by going up towards this first bend, and then we'll go across this bridge that we can see in the artwork here, and then after we come across this bridge we take kind of a steep decline down into what looks like we're going inside of a cave, and this cave area will be located directly under where we've just been with that incline up around the bend. And then as we come out of the cave, we'll zip around where the overlook is with the riverboat dock, and we'll then head up towards the Colorado Rocky inspired mountainous landscape, and we're actually going to be going up that mountainous landscape and zipping around the mountains quite a bit up there, maybe doubling back on ourselves a little bit, and then we will make our way round the exterior of the show building there somehow, and we find ourselves over on the other side of the Cars area over near Big Thunder Mountain, and this is where we kind of drive throughout the geysers of the area, and then we continue the race around the smaller, more family friendly flat ride attraction and underneath that final bridge, and heading towards the finish line for the end of the attractions. And so this is going to be an expansive and ambitious attraction, but it's also not going to be just a clone of Radiator Springs Races with that slot car based ride system. It's going to be something unique and different, and from what the rumours seem to indicate, this is going to be a trackless outdoor ride system for this attraction, and everything seems to point towards it being supplied potentially by Dynamic Attractions, and it may be using the AGVT all-terrain trackless ride system which you can see here in this footage, or maybe Imagineering are developing their own proprietary version of an outdoor trackless ride system which might be fairly similar to this, and this footage should just be used as a reference point. But either way, this is going to be an outdoor trackless ride system like we've never seen before at a Disney park, and that is where the thrill element's going to come into this, as you're going to be off-roading around a national park environment. And the Dynamic Attractions element to this whole thing, it could be using this same ride system that we can see in the footage, as after all, Dynamic Attractions does have a long history with Walt Disney Imagineering, collaborating with them, as Dynamic Attractions provided the ride systems for Radiator Springs Races at California Venture and Test Track, that slot car ride system. So it would make sense that they could be working with Dynamic Attractions here, and also the fact that they're looking to retrack Big Thunder Mountain at the same time in early 2025 and doing an extensive refurbishment to Big Thunder Mountain at Walt Disney World. And back in 2014, when they did the same thing at Disneyland and did a retrack of Big Thunder Mountain there, it was Dynamic Attractions who did the coaster retracking for Big Thunder Mountain in Disneyland. So it could be that they're working with Dynamic Attractions on both the Big Thunder Mountain refurbishment and also this new attraction for Cars as well. Another thing to mention here is that Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy over at Hollywood Studios is going to be closing on October 7th. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that the animatronic from Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy over there, that is most likely going to be boxed up and kept in storage somewhere, and then we'll make the very short trip down the road, just a few miles down the road, to Magic Kingdom, and will probably reappear in this new Cars attraction, as we can see in the concept art that they've got a Lightning McQueen animatronic at the finish line for this attraction. And so most likely they'll probably be repurposing that Lightning McQueen animatronic and using it for this attraction in the Magic Kingdom. And then the last thing I want to make a note of here within the whole Cars area is the secondary smaller attraction within this land. It's said to be a family friendly ride. It's going to be a flat ride, and from what we can see within the artwork at least, it seems like it's going to probably use a whip ride system similar to Mater's Junkyard Jamboree or Alien Swirling Saucers over in Toy Story Land. The ride system of the whip ride system is very reliable. It doesn't have many maintenance concerns and can work in all kinds of weather. So that's everything we know so far for this Cars area coming to the Magic Kingdom. But now, as always, it's over to you, the Waltineers. I would like to know, what are your thoughts and opinions on everything discussed today. Rivers of America being removed, this new Cars attraction with the whole trackless outdoor element to it all, whether you're excited to see that new ride system, I certainly am, within this attraction, and also just within the Magic Kingdom, this new type of attraction there as well. I haven't actually mentioned this in the video yet, but the time frame for when this Cars area should be complete is roughly 2028. They're looking at around a 3-year build time for this 4 to 4.5 acre land within Frontierland here as well. And of course, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe down below, hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest. And also I'd like to say a special thank you to the official Waltineer Club over on Patreon for always supporting this channel, along with a special shout out to the official Waltineer Gold members that you can see here on the screen right now, along with official Waltineer Diamond members Kyle Mahan, Justin Tupper and JC Russell. And so with that being said for today, I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.